Greetings, HD students, and happy chapter number 24. So let's continue our conversation about late adulthood and talk about what is going on cognitively or within our brain during this time. So yeah, some of our brain cells are going to die off. That's what happens as we age. So that aging process, senescence, that's what that means, the aging process. It reduces the production of our neurotransmitters. Remember, our neurotransmitters are those chemicals that carry the information from one brain cell to the next. Right? That's what they do. And so we don't have as many of those. So that results in our brain taking a little bit more time to process. If you watched that YouTube video that we had in chapter number 23, you saw that as some of the senior citizens were talking and describing things, they talk a little bit slower than maybe we do in our younger years because they're processing a little bit slower. Therefore, patience is required, right? So again, they're slower in their reaction time, in their talking, in their thinking. This is what we can expect. We mentioned before ageism and how destructive it is to our senior population. And, you know, sometimes because we need to be careful of the words that we use with our elders. So what is dementia? Dementia is a pathological loss of brain functioning. And there's several different types of dementia. So if you look at the umbrella, look at the picture on the right-hand side. Look at the umbrella is the term dementia, which means, again, it's a loss of pathological functioning. Under dementia is several different types. And the one we are most familiar with is Alzheimer's disease. But Alzheimer's disease is really just a form of dementia. Okay. So again, being careful in our words because terms like calling someone senile is considered derogatory. So it's considered an ageist term. You know, so if you had a older individual that you were speaking with and they said something like, well, I'm pretty sure that the Giants won the game last night, and you say something like, you must be senile. They did not win the game last night. That's not cool. Because the term is derogatory, you're really making fun and saying that this individual has kind of lost their brain functioning, and we don't want to do that. All right, so let's talk about Alzheimer's disease, AD. So Alzheimer's disease, again, we have it all around the world. It is caused partly by our genes, partly genetic, and it progresses fairly quickly. What happens with Alzheimer's disease is we lose brain functioning. However, our body can be healthy as a horse. So you can have individuals that have Alzheimer's disease that live 20, 30 years with the disease because their body hasn't given out yet. Eventually, their body will give out. We don't typically die from Alzheimer's. We typically die from a physical condition related to that. So let's look at it. What does it look like? So if we look at this slide of a cross-section of a brain, we see the right-hand slide shows a healthy brain. Right? Lots of activity going on here, nice and plump. The left-hand slide is a picture of, you know, somebody who has had Alzheimer's disease. This is from an autopsy after death to show, do you see how much smaller the Alzheimer's brain is? So what happens is we have our brain and we have, you know, all of our neurons. With Alzheimer's disease, we get like, I think of it as a white plaque. Think of the plaque you get on your teeth. You could sometimes scrape it off if you haven't brushed your teeth, right? So this plaque attacks or it covers up our brain. And what happens is as the plaque accumulates, it's shrinking our brain in size, which therefore shrinks what we can remember, what we can do, right? So Alzheimer's disease is devastating for families because you may go visit your mother or your grandmother and they don't know who you are. Right? You may visit, you know, your spouse, your partner who has Alzheimer's disease, and they may be in a facility and they may be flirting with somebody else, or they may have another partner because they don't know you. And that's devastating, but it's not their fault. It is a disease, a devastating disease. So we do have a lot of facilities, our long-term care facilities, that take care of patients who have dementia. We kind of have what we call a locked ward, which means they'll be part of the facility where the doors are locked. And they're locked because these patients tend to wander. So they will wander out the front door and just walk on down the road, not knowing where they're going or who they are. And so for safety reasons, we have them in a locked facility. Now, another form of dementia or of neurocognitive disorder, that's really what we call them. We call diseases of the brain. We think of them as neurocognitive disorders. And another one is vascular disease. Vascular disease is similar to if you were to have mini strokes in your brain, that's what vascular disease is. So if we look at the next slide, vascular disease and Alzheimer's look different in patients. So the black line is an Alzheimer's disease patient. And if your loved one is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, you could expect them from the time of diagnosis to just have a straight decline. They are not going to get better. They are going to continue to lose functioning. However, with vascular dementia, it looks different, because with vascular dementia, what's happening is we have a little clot that is blocking the flow of blood to our brain. And so what happens when that happens is all of a sudden your loved one doesn't know who you are. They don't remember where they are, all of that. And then you go to visit your grandma 2 weeks later and she knows your name. And you're like, oh, grandma's getting better. She knows me today. Oh my goodness. But what happens is your loved one is probably going to have another mini stroke. And so the red line is a patient that has vascular dementia, because this patient is going to go through stages of getting better and then getting worse. Better, worse, better, worse. Different than an Alzheimer's patient who just, again, only gets worse. So another form of neurocognitive disorder is called Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is a little different in the sense that it does affect young people. Michael J. Fox is an actor from my generation, moons ago, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's very early in life, and he's been an advocate for getting the word out there about what it's like to fight against Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's disease is different. Parkinson's affects the body before it affects the brain. The other diseases is the opposite. It affects the brain first. But with Parkinson's, you're going to notice all of a sudden that your body doesn't work the way you want it to. In other words, you try to go move your arm or your hand or get something and it won't happen. Or you get muscle tremors where your body is shaking. And so you will have all of these physical things happen before it starts to attack your brain and you get dementia. Many patients actually die from Parkinson's disease before it gets to that stage. But it was really fascinating because I actually was shopping in a department store one time and I saw a patient with this disease. So there was an older gentleman, and the gentleman was walking in the store and he was walking fine. And then all of a sudden he froze mid-step. So like he had 1 foot in front, 1 foot behind, and he was frozen. He wasn't moving forward or backwards. And so I noticed, and so I'm going to go over there to ask if I can help him in any way. And what happened was he had a service animal with him. There was a dog. And so what I saw was the dog walk around to the front of the patient, and the dog took his paw and he actually hit the man's left foot that was back. He hit the person's foot and the foot started moving. And the man just started walking like normal, like he had never stopped. And it was amazing to see how it's like the body was stuck, right? And you had to remind the body, this is what we do to walk. And the dog had been trained to help that to happen. Pretty fascinating. But Parkinson's disease. So what can we do? What can we do so we don't get Alzheimer's and all these different things? Well, there's some things we can work on, which is mainly back to exercise, right? It's so important that we, keep our body physically healthy so that if we are attacked with any of these conditions, at least our body will be in a really good shape to kind of function as best it can. You see here some, seniors doing some exercise they can do. I mentioned that I teach gerontology at Sac State, and my students are in their last year of earning their bachelor's degree in gerontology, and they do an internship. And so I have to go to the different facilities that they're doing their internships at. And so some of my students will be really creative in coming up with programs for seniors like chair Zumba. So this is when our seniors would sit in a chair like you see here, and they would actually be doing a lot of different exercises, but they're not getting up because these seniors are unstable. So we can't have them stand up and move back and forth because they will likely fall. And so we're trying to keep them as active as possible, even though they're limited in their mobility. All right. So really, remember Maslow and that triangle, that hierarchy of needs? Maslow says that, you know, the top of that triangle would be self-actualization. It's this kind of place where we are very content. We feel like we've come to see our identity. We've come to experience life. We have looked within, and we are, you know, pretty, like I said, it doesn't mean you achieved everything you wanted to achieve. It means that you are content, you're satisfied with life, and you are self-actualized in a very kind of inward spiritual sense. And of course, our elders are more likely to achieve this than our young people. In other words, when you're 20 years old, you kind of are still struggling with who am I? You're not at this place of self-actualizing and being happy with some of your past decisions and where you are today. The good thing about our brain or our mind as we get older is, as we age, we kind of lose some of that analytical, focused on always problem solving, and we open up more of a creative, artistic expression part of our brain. And this is great because this is why our seniors sometimes love to garden, they love to paint, they love to do these things, because even though when they were younger, they thought, I never used to like doing this, all of a sudden, they're more able to do these different types of things. When we think of Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel, and to think that at 75 years of age, he could produce this. He could actually, this is a roof, right? So he could actually create these 7 scenes that are cohesive and then paint it at 75 years old is just amazing. So something to look forward to. Right? Make sure you go through your clicker slides, and I will then see you for our last chapter on late adulthood, talking about what's going on emotionally as we age.